Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's economics lesson. My name is Leah Mofokeng. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. Today we're going to look at the main topic of economic pursuits. This is a continuation of the previous lesson that we had last Friday. So we're going to look at the following. Financial incentives to improve industrial development. You remember that when we're talking about establishment of industries at a certain geographical region, we're referring to regional development. So in order to attract businesses to be established at specific geographical areas, they need to be encouraged financially. So I am going to take you through different types of financial incentives that can be used to improve industrial and regional development in the country. We will further look at the appropriateness of South Africa's regional development policies in terms of benchmark criteria. Remember that what we are doing as a country, we are benchmarked internationally. So I will also take you through that. We will also look at small business development and close with the broad-based Black economic empowerment, our BBEE. So this is a paper 1 topic. In your paper 1, whether in the prelim exam or in the final exam, you'll find it in section A, question 1, section B, question 3, question 4, and section C, question 6. Let's start first by looking at some of the concepts that you might need to know. Let's start with the Black Business Supplier Development Program. This is a cost-sharing grant offered to small Black-owned enterprises to assist them to improve their competitiveness and sustainability. We all know that if you own a business, you will incur certain costs. Some of these costs might be too much. So if you are a Black person and you own a small business, this is the grant that through the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition one can access so that it can assist in terms of reducing cost of the business. Number 2, the concept is critical infrastructure program. This one offers grants for projects that require new, expanded or improved infrastructure. Sometimes you'll find that where the business is going to be established, there is no proper infrastructure. Some of the cost of making sure that there is infrastructure might be carried by the business itself. So the government, through the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, will provide financial grant, and you don't just receive it, one has to apply for it. You don't qualify automatically. Number 3, we have foreign investment grant. This grant is for foreigners who want to establish businesses in South Africa. So as a result, if they apply for this particular grant, the government can assist them to move certain machinery and equipment from their country of origin to South Africa. Another one is small and medium development program. This one is a program that offers grants paid to local and foreign manufacturing starting new businesses. So this one, whether you are a foreigner or a South African, but you want to start a new business which focuses on manufacturing, this is the type of a grant that one can apply for. The last one is the broad-based Black economic empowerment. We also call it BBEE. Like I've mentioned previously that in South Africa, in terms of the economy, there were inequalities. Certain disadvantaged or marginalized groups of people were not able to participate in the economy. So this is one of those policies that we call redress policies. They're trying to close previous gaps which were created by the past government. So it's a government policy to advance economic transformation, hence I said it's a redress policy, and it enhances the economic participation of Black people in the South African economy. This means that black people were also those who were marginalized. So for 2 marks in section B of the prelim exam or the final examinations, you can be asked to list any incentives used by the South African government to improve industrial development. So you need to know these incentives. So firstly, as a low order type of a question where you don't have to think, you have to recall the information that you were taught in the classroom. You will have to just list, no explanation. So number 1, we have the Small Business Support Program. We also have SEDA Technology Program. We also have Skills Support Program. And then we have Critical Infrastructure Program, followed by Custom-Free Incentive, Foreign Investment Incentives. We also have Strategic Investment Program, and we have Services to Business Processes. So for 2 marks, you can be asked to just list or to name. Then the story can change. You can also be asked to explain for 8 marks. If the question is an 8-mark question and, for example, you are asked to discuss briefly or explain briefly Small Business Support Program, then it means that you will have to write in full sentences. Where you are asked to discuss or to explain, and the question is an 8-mark question, it means that you need 4 sentences, 4 full sentences, and make sure that you write in a point form. So let us start first by looking at the Small Business Support Program. If for 8 marks you are required to explain or briefly explain Small Business Support Program as a financial incentive to improve industrial development, what you can do, you need to mention how this particular grant works. So this program is designed for small businesses. First of all, what is key here is that it is designed for small businesses. But these small businesses should not have assets which are more than 100 million. It's only for small businesses with assets which are less than 100 million. If your business is small but the assets are more than 100 million, then you don't qualify for this particular grant, or your business doesn't qualify. This incentive consists of a tax-free grant for investment in industries. So you don't pay tax for this particular grant, and its purpose should be for investment in industries. The grants are available not only to new industries, but they are also available for existing industries which needs to expand. However, this grant, the Small Business Support Program, is only offered for 3 years. After 3 years, your industry should be able to sustain itself. It should be self-sustaining. It should keep on going without government financial support. Let's look at another one. This is another grant. We call it SEDA Technology Program. You can also call it STP. But remember, when you are answering questions in section B and section C, you can use acronyms everywhere. But you're not allowed to use acronyms and abbreviation when you are answering section A, question number 1.3. So what is SEDA Technology Program? Let's start first with SEDA. The S stands for small, the E stands for enterprise, D stands for development, A stands for agency. So SEDA in full is Small Enterprise Development Agency. So this, remember, when you produce goods in an industry, you need the main factors of production, and you also need to use appropriate technology. So this particular grant, it focuses on providing a range of services that empowers small businesses to access appropriate technology. So if your business is not using appropriate technology, your business might not be able to produce even goods of quality, might not even be able to be productive and be competitive. So the aim is to make sure that these small businesses access appropriate technology so that they can become competitive and grow. That is what this grant is all about. We have another grant, skills support program. Without even myself explaining how it works, one can see that this particular graph is for improving skills of the workers in South Africa. Let's look how it works. It is a cash incentives to encourage greater investment in skills training. Sometimes you find that in an industry, workers have been employed, but they lack certain skills. So this grant is available to cater for that. Sometimes you find that with technological development, where maybe the industry is no longer using a particular technology, they are using a new technology. Instead of structurally making people unemployed, people can be trained so that they can acquire new advanced skills. And it is mainly for the South African labor force. But this particular grant only covers to a maximum of 50% of the training cost. So meaning that the government through the DTIC will only be able to pay 50% of the cost of training the labor force in that particular industry. Let's look at another grant. There is enough of them. We have Critical Infrastructure Program, CIP. So this one is a cost-sharing grant for projects designed to improve infrastructure in South Africa. Like I've mentioned when we looked at the terminology that you're going to find in this particular lesson, you find that an industry should be established, but where it is, there is lack of infrastructure such as communication, transport, energy, water, electricity, etc. So if an industry is established and you find that as the owner, you are the one who provided this particular infrastructure, the DTIC can provide an allowance for that. But this allowance, you won't receive it immediately. You have to continue with the project, and at the end of the project, that is when the grant can be offered. But it offers between 10% and 30% of the qualifying infrastructure, but there is a maximum of 50 million. You don't have to exceed that. Like I've mentioned, it becomes available on completion of the particular project. Another grant. Continuing. Okay, let's continue with the Critical Infrastructure Program. This program is available for private sector and is also available for public sector. With public sector, you'll find that where there are state-owned industrial parks, infrastructure is also needed. Even our local government municipalities, they are involved in the provisioning of infrastructure in the municipalities. So as a result, they also qualify for the grant. Even our private businesses who provide infrastructure while establishing the industry, they also qualify. It is not only for public sector only, it is also extended to the private sector. So examples, I have also mentioned that it can be roads, electricity, water purification, etc. Let's look at custom-free incentives. In the previous lesson, I mentioned that we have industrial development zones. We call them IDZs. We also have SEZ, Special Economic Zones. Their aim is to make sure that goods are manufactured, either they are exported, and they also benefit the economy because there will be more job opportunities, standard of living will improve, and standard of living as it improves, the people will have access to basic economic things. So as a result, the economy will also be diversified. There's a lot of benefits from the SEZ and IDZ. So what incentive do they receive? One of the incentives that they receive is that where there is an IDZ and where there is an SEZ, they qualify to import raw materials and intermediate goods from other countries free from paying import duties, because the aim will be to produce goods in South Africa and then those goods should be again exported. So to lower their cost is that they will not pay import duties when they import raw materials or intermediate goods for manufacturing, mainly for the purpose of exportation. Hence, we say that it is a duty-free incentive. They don't pay import duty, okay, on intermediate goods and even for the raw materials that they have used. We have foreign investment incentive. This is a cash incentive to assist foreign investors. It is not for local investors. It's for foreign investors, because sometimes you find that the investor has new machinery in his country of origin, has new equipment which need to be transported to South Africa. So it is costly to transport the machinery. So they qualify for this particular grant. But the business should be for manufacturing. Okay, should be for manufacturing. It covers the cost of relocating new machinery and equipment from abroad to South Africa, but it excludes transportation of vehicles. If the investor wants to transport the vehicles, this grant doesn't cover the transportation of vehicles. It covers only transportation of new machinery and equipment from abroad. And there's a limit. It covers up to 15% of the value of the new equipment or machinery. The actual relocation cost should not exceed 10 million rands. Should be 10 million and below. We have strategic investment program. How does it work? This again is an incentive that makes an additional industrial development investment, but only to certain projects. Let's look at those projects. This grant or allowance is available in the manufacturing projects, information technology and research, plus to the development field. Is not open for other things, but mainly for manufacturing, information technology and research, plus development fields. We also have services to business processes. This one, it aims to attract investment and create employment in South Africa, but how? Through offshore activities that will be done in foreign countries, but which are able to create jobs in South Africa. So these activities are done in another country, owned by South Africans, but they create jobs in South Africa. So tax is exempted from this particular grant, and this grant is also offered for 3 years for each offshore job that is created and maintained. Let's look at how it works. Okay, this is how it works. A bonus of 20% will be provided, but only if 4,000 jobs up to 8,000 jobs are created. And this grant will only paid as a once-off in that particular year when between 4,000 and 8,000 jobs were created. And then it also pays 30% of the bonus only if more than 8,000 offshore jobs are created, but it is a once-off payment in that particular year. So meaning that if the following year no jobs are created, the bonus will not be payable. We're moving to another subtopic, which is appropriateness of South Africa's industrial policy. With this type of a subtopic, that is where for 8 marks, you can come across a higher order question, a question of a higher cognitive level, where you are asked to evaluate the appropriateness of South Africa's industrial development policies. With this type of a subtopic, you must be able to criticize and even to support whatever statement that you make. So this is going to be linked with our previous lesson. In our previous lesson, I mentioned that National Industrial Policy Framework, which is also called NIPF, is one of the industrial development policies. So we see that it's a best policy. It is an appropriate policy, but the problem is that it is hindered by unemployment problem. Unemployment is still a problem, so this particular policy is not able to reach its target. We also have SDIs. You remember that they are special development initiatives. They failed to ensure that the economic growth increases. Even this SDIs, the growth rate is lower than expected, and huge amount of money are spent on SDIs and even to improve infrastructure. But when you look at the growth, it's lower. The main objective of creating employment has not been achieved. Remember, with SDIs, we said it is targeting those underdeveloped areas where unemployment is the highest, where poverty is the highest. But we still find that there is a high level of poverty, there is high level on unemployment. But the SDI is a good initiative, but it is failing to achieve high employment and to reduce poverty. Let us look at the IDZ. IDZ in the previous lesson, in full, it is Industrial Development Zone. I did mention that IDZ had their own weaknesses. The incentives offered were not attractive enough. So this IDZ, they were converted into SEZ. So even economic growth that was targeted did not even improve. So we can say that, yes, there were those IDZ which when they were started, they were performing. But now, not all of them were performing. They had to be converted. If they were performing, we could have still having what? IDZ. But now we no longer have IDZ, we have SEZ replacing them. Corridors. Corridors have facilitated easy trade between South Africa and the neighboring countries. So you can see we have Maputo Development Corridor. This played an important part or role when it comes to economic integration. Trade relations between South Africa and the neighboring countries improved because of corridors. Appropriateness of South Africa's industrial development policies. We still have a problem. I did mention that during the past government, the industries were concentrated in 4 metropolitan areas. This is still the problem, where we find that in the Gauteng province, we still have a concentration of industries in the Western Cape, in the East London, we do have in the Durban, Pinetown, we still have a concentration of industries, whereas there are still those regions in the countries which are neglected. That is why you will see workers still have to move where employment is. It's obvious in our province, Gauteng. That is where we see more people coming from other provinces and other neighboring countries. They are flocking to Gauteng, and Gauteng is overpopulated. As a result, it is because the industrial development policies in South Africa are failing to decentralize industries because they are still concentrated in the 4 main metropolitan areas. When it comes to small business development, this is successful. I will take you through the programs which the South African government through the DTIC are using to make sure that small businesses are developed. This one can be regarded as a success. Promotion of entrepreneurship, especially among the youth and women, is also a success. There are programs which facilitate entrepreneurship for women and young entrepreneurs. So I will also show you some of these programs during this particular lesson. There is also an improvement in terms of access to finance and capital information and advice. Like this financial incentives that I have explained to you, they are part of this. They make sure that there is funding and there is also capital and even advice for businesses, small ones and medium sized, as well as large business undertakings. Let's look at this particular subtopic: international best practice for regional development according to the benchmark criteria. I mentioned earlier that South Africa is benchmarked with international businesses. So as a result, when it comes to industrial and regional development, we need to meet certain criteria. The first one is free market orientation. We know that when we talk about free market orientation, we're talking about that particular situation whereby market forces like demand and supply are the ones which are influencing decision-making prices as well in the country. So with free market orientation, the government should not play a bigger role. The government participation in the economy when it comes to businesses, it should be minimal. The government can either play the role of regulating, establishment of businesses, preventing illegal measures, etc. But the private sector should be given the opportunity to run businesses so that the forces of supply and demand can operate freely, and this will also lead toward efficient utilization of resources and allocation of resources. This can also help to prevent public sector failures and market failures. Number 2, we have competitiveness. So when you look at South African businesses, we find that in most cases they rely on financial assistance from the grant. And when the financial assistance is removed, you then realize that the business or the industries are unable to compete with other foreign industries on their own. So with competitiveness, we're saying industries or businesses established as a result of regional development policy should be competitive and not need ongoing financial aid. So if the government, let's say for example, after 3 years, the government removed the financial aid, the business should still continue and not shut down. It should be able to be self-sustainable without government assistance. The third one is sustainability. Okay, let's look at sustainability. The capacity of a region has to support its own development. So when we were looking in the previous lesson, we looked at regional development. I did mention that the government is aiming at unlocking the potential of underdeveloped regions, where you find that a particular region has resources, has a mineral, or maybe it has an advantage of tourism or agriculture. Those potentials should be unlocked and be utilized. So they should not only be unlocked, they should be able to sustain that particular region. So be it natural resource, like I've mentioned, be it human resource of that particular region should be harnessed. The people in that particular region should be exposed to skills development, should be exposed to education, so that they can also be able to find jobs in the very same region. Instead of seeing workers moving from one region to another looking for jobs, that particular region should be able to create and sustain jobs for its own people in that region. Let's look at good governance. We know that our South African government has a high rate of nepotism when it comes to certain issues of the economy. Fraud is high, corruption is high, people are not held, or officials are not held accountable for their behavior. There's apathy. You can go back and think about reasons for public sector failures. So when it comes to regional development and industrial development, everything should be managed in such a way that they are managed effectively and there is a free from corruption. Corruption should be prevented or minimized, or it shouldn't take place at all, so that regional development can take place. So the principle of accountability, whereby officials are held liable for their action, it should take place. And there should also be transparency when it comes to finances, so that there can be control. Projects should be correctly programmed, monitored, and evaluated. Another criteria, which is criteria number 5, is provision and resources. The underdeveloped areas and the poorly resourced areas in South Africa should be provided with resources. There are those regions that they don't have resources. So resources should be provided by the government. Infrastructure should be provided by the government. Number 6, we have investment in social capital. When we're talking about social capital, we're talking about issues of education, issues of health. If we have a labor force which is not educated, which is not skilled, our economy won't grow. Remember that uneducated and unskilled workers, they are less productive as compared to educated and skilled workers. So to ensure that in the regions productivity takes place, the government should ensure that there is access to education and to skills. Again, let us look at healthcare. Healthcare, we're still referring to the quality of labor. Sick workers, they are less productive as compared to healthy workers. So healthcare facilities in that particular region should also be improved and be accessible, so that the quality of labor in those regions in terms of education and healthcare is excellent or good. Integration. This simply means that regional development should use an integrated approach, where you find that the potential of a particular region is spilled over to another region. So an integrated approach should be followed, ensuring that the benefits in one part of a region spill over to industries and areas in another part. Corridors, you saw when I explained to you how corridors work. Corridors have the potential to do that, where you find that with Maputo corridor, which starts in Gauteng, it spills to Mpumalanga and to Maputo. So that's what should happen. The industries in Gauteng province, they should also spill over to the northwest, which is known for mining, etc. Partnerships. In the previous lesson, I mentioned triple P's, where there's partnership between private sector and public sector. Private sector doing what? Providing jobs. Private sector establishing businesses, bringing equipment, machinery, raw materials, etc. The government, which is public sector, providing what? Providing infrastructure such as road, energy, water, etc. So for regional development to take place, different stakeholders should be available. So it is not only limited to private and public sector. Central government represent public sector, local authorities represent public sector. Even civil society should also be part of regional development. Special interest groups such as the labor union, such as the organization of farmers, taxi owners, etc., should also form part of this partnership. Non-government organization also should also form form part of this partnership together with the private sector so that the aims of industrial development and regional development can be achieved. Let's take a 2 minutes break before we can look at small business development. Okay, let's look at the small business development in South Africa. We have aims for the small business development. Number one, obviously, it will be to create employment, especially for structurally unemployed people. There are people who are unemployed because of the change in technology which took place where they were employed. So they can get the opportunity to get employed in small businesses. That is why small businesses should be developed in South Africa. To provide incentives for small businesses, sometimes you find that the small businesses cannot grow on their own. They need financial assistance from the government. So this is one of the aims why they should be developed. To provide easier access to capital information and business advice. Sometimes you find that this particular business is small, it has the potential to grow, but the entrepreneur or the owner of the business doesn't know how to do that. Business advice and information can be accessed from the DTIC, or the business need some funding. The DTIC can also provide capital for that. It aims to promote entrepreneurial development among the women and the youth. Always remember why women and youth. Women and youth are regarded as the disadvantaged and previously marginalized people in the economy. So the reason why small business development should take place is to make sure that our youth become entrepreneurs. The women or the females also become entrepreneurs. Okay, this information and even the programs to assist the youth, to assist the women, to make sure that there is funding, there's incentives, etc., can be accessed from the DTIC. So there are certain and different programs. Let's start with the SEDA one. SEDA supports small businesses. It is a program that can be accessed through the DTIC. We also have Black Business Supplier Development Program, which offers grants in a cost-sharing scheme to Black-owned businesses for the purpose of what? Skills training, business skills training. Sometimes you find that with us, the Blacks, because we didn't get the share in the economy to participate, what happens is that when we are exposed to owning a business, our business, they don't grow, they don't thrive, they even become shut down even before they can enjoy maximum profit. So as a result, the Black Business Supply Development Program offers a grant, but only to the Blacks, so that they can be given what? Business skills training. Most people, you'll hear them saying that, oh, it's a Black-owned business, it won't grow. But we have programs that support the Blacks so that their businesses can grow in terms of management, in terms of leadership, how to run the business. The Black Business Supply Development Program is there. We also have Khula Enterprise Finance Ltd, which helps small, medium, micro enterprises to get what? Loans from the banks. You might find yourself having an excellent business idea, but you don't know how to start the business. You don't even have the means, which is the capital. Then you can approach Khula Enterprise Finance Limited, which will assist you to qualify for a bank loan. Sometimes when you approach the bank for starting a business, because you never earned an income, there's no record which the bank can use to track whether you are able to manage funds, etc., you find that your loan is not approved. But through Khula Enterprise Finance Limited, entrepreneurs can access bank loans. Remember that one of the aims of small business development is to empower women and youth. So we also have Umzobombu Youth Fund. By merely saying youth, this is a particular program which helps the youth to set up their businesses, to even expand them by teaching them essential business skills. We also have Technology for Women in Business, TWIB, which aims to make sure that science and technology is more accessible to women in business, especially those in the small, medium, micro enterprises. Let's look at the broad-based Black economic empowerment. It is also part of industrial and regional development. In the previous lesson, I managed to explain to you that regional development will also benefit the disadvantaged and the marginalized. I mentioned that either by making sure that they are entrepreneurs, or they are shareholders, or they hold top managerial positions in these particular industries. So through the Black economic empowerment, remember previously it was just called Black economic empowerment. So even your textbooks still refer to it as Black economic empowerment, but now it's called broad-based Black economic empowerment. So let us look at how it works. The main objective of the Triple B is the inclusion of the Black in the economy. We were excluded previously in the economy, but now with the Triple BEE, we should be included in the economy so that we can participate. It targets historically disadvantaged people. Black people are in the category, women also, the youth, people from rural communities, and the disabled people. But the broad-based Black economic empowerment also broadly defines us as Africans, we part of it, Indians are part of it, as well as the colored. They are also regarded as the previously people who were marginalized. It also encourages businesses to integrate black people in the workspace. That is where I mentioned that by either making sure that they are skilled or they also hold top managerial positions. Previously, we know that the whites were the ones who mainly were holding top managerial positions, and they were also the main shareholders in most of the companies which are listed. So now through the triple BEE, then it wants to integrate black people in the workspace, even support of the black businesses, and to give back to the poor black communities affected by the land repossession. Let's continue with triple BEE. Businesses are awarded points which can claim on a BBEE certificate, which entitles them to a greater chance of obtaining government contracts. If your business has a triple BEE certificate, it gets the opportunity to participate in government contracts. Some of you call them the government tenders. Yes, if there's a government tender to supply food, government tender to supply cleaning equipment, or to build a bridge, to build RDP houses, if your business has a triple BEE certificate, it will qualify to obtain such contracts. That's one of the benefits of triple BEE. Other objectives is to empower local and rural communities to have equal access to economic opportunities. It increases access to infrastructure, skills training programs, and economic activities for black people. Remember, some of the black people were removed forcefully from the land that they previously occupied during the apartheid era, and they were allocated land in remote areas which are rural and even poor. So as a result, triple BEE also is aiming at providing infrastructure to those people who are located where? In the very, very rural areas which lack infrastructure. And in those rural areas, you'll find that there are majority of people who need skills training, so that when they own these companies, they also able to apply their skills. Those who are employed in these companies, they can also be able to use their skills which they received through skill training programs and through SETAs, learnerships and internships, but specifically for black people. It improves human resource development of black people through programs such as learnerships, like I have mentioned. It empowers black people to manage. Remember, I mentioned that those top positions, to either manage or to own businesses by becoming what? Shareholders in the listed companies. This should include black women, black workers, communities, and cooperatives. It also promotes investment that leads to broad-based participation in economy by the black people. So looking at this particular policy, whatever policy that we dealt with in the industrial development and regional development, you need to be able to evaluate this policy. Evaluate them as to whether they are successful and as to whether they are not successful. Even the broad-based black economic equity, then you need to know how to evaluate it. Sorry for that. So let's move to examples of questions that you can be exposed to. We have data response questions. I want to read first for you the data response. Industrial Policy Action Plan, IPAP. It's one of the policies that we have in South Africa. This one was for 2018-19 to 2020-21. It reads as follows. Industrial policy has the overarching objective of enhancing the productive capabilities of the economy. In other words, industrial policy aims to increase the economy's ability to produce more and more complex and high value-added products with greater efficiency. The key challenge to industrial policy is to incentivize investment in plant technologies and skills that would have medium to long-term benefit to the economy. So this information has been sourced from the website of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. So the questions that you see in front of you, we call them data response questions, and they fall under middle order questions. By merely being called data response questions, they are a middle order questions. But inside the middle order questions, you will find two questions which are easy, which is our number 1.1 for 1 mark and our number 1.2 for 1 mark. You will also find two moderate questions, which is our 1.3 and 1.4 for 2 marks each. And the last question will be a difficult question whereby you will be required to apply your knowledge, where you will be required to be creative. So that is where you'll find that the question is allocated 4 marks because it is a little bit higher or difficult in terms of when you compare it with question 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3. So question 1.1, when you look at the data that is presented, it should trigger the answer. Like I've mentioned that we have industrial policy action plan, but look at, as a policy, look at the question, name an industrial policy which is not mentioned in the extract. Already your life has been made easier. You know that in this extract you have EPAP, then you should be able to recall the other policy. Which government department is responsible for industrial development in South Africa? Sometimes it's not necessarily that the answer should be from the extract, but if you look at the source itself, you can see that the DTIC, you can see the answer there, but in most cases, you might find that the answer is not there. Yours is to recall that particular department. 1.3. You can be asked to briefly describe a certain concept. In this instant, the concept is value-added goods. And this, you can remember it from what you have been taught, from what is in your textbook, what is in the study guides that you are using. 1.4, explain the focus of skills support program. I explained this as part of the financial incentives. So yours is to recall and do what? And explain. So the difference between 1.1.1 and 1.3 is that with 1.3, you need to write in a full sentence. 1.4 again, you need to write in a full sentence, whereas 1.1, you just give one word. Okay. 1.5, I mentioned that it needs critical or creativity, so critical thinking. The question says, how can the South African economy benefit from providing value-added goods? This is you thinking very hard. How can South Africa as an economy benefit from it? And then because it is 4 marks, you will need 2 sentences. Let's look at how you should respond to these questions. Name an industrial policy which is not mentioned in the extract above. One that is not mentioned is the National Industrial Policy Framework. And because this is a Section B question, in Section B, you are allowed, even in Section C, you are allowed to use acronyms. It's simply 1 mark. Which government department is responsible for industrial development in South Africa? It is the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Even this, you can write the acronym. You don't have to think very hard. You just recall. What is value-added goods? You can explain it as raising the value of a product to be able to sell it at a higher price than its original form. Like sand. Sand, if you change it into glass, the form is now more valuable than when it was in its natural state as sand. Then that transformation of raw material into a final product, it's what is called value added goods. And for that you qualify for 2 marks, or you can write that the production of a product in a manner that it enhances its value from its natural state. Okay, hence it is written briefly describe. You don't have to write it as it appears in your textbook. Briefly describe it means that you are given the opportunity to even describe it in the manner that you understand it. You don't have to reproduce it as it appears in your textbook. Explain the focus of skills support program. It's only 2 marks. You need only 1 sentence to explain it. You can say this is a cash incentive to encourage greater investment in skills training and to introduce new advanced skills to South African labor force. Or you can even mention that the cash incentive, it is a cash incentive which covers a maximum of 50% of a company trading cost for skills training. Let's look at that question that requires you to be creative. How can the South African economy benefit from providing value-added goods? Mark allocation is important. Always answer according to the mark allocation. Don't give us 2 pages, whereas it is only 4 marks. So it means that you need only 2 sentences. Number 1, you can mention that South Africa can benefit because this will increase economic growth of a country. As a result, there will be goods which are ready for consumption. Remember, value-added goods, these goods are in their final state and they are ready for consumption. So if more of them are produced, more of them are bought, more of them are sold, the economic growth will improve. And if economic growth improve, this will lead to what? Job creation. Because of the greater demand of the goods, more workers will be needed, and it will lead to job creation, especially where in the labor-intensive industries, where labor-intensive workers are employed. And there is an example here in the clothing or textile industries. If economic growth increases, and we also producing more and we are exporting more, this can lead to an improvement in the country's balance of payment, because more goods will be exported than are imported, and the BOP will be positive. But you only need 2 sentences. Okay, the improvement in economic growth could be used for economic development. What does this mean? This simply means that the improvement in economic growth will lead to the improvement in the standard of living of the people, because they will be able to get jobs, they will receive an income, they will be able to satisfy their needs and wants. There is another question. This one is not a data response question. This is a paragraph question of middle order. How do you detect the action verb? Briefly explain, and the mark allocation is 8. Where you briefly explain, you recalling what you learned from your textbooks, from your teachers. You simply have to produce it. So, but this question is two-folded. You briefly explain good government. When you come across this type of question, you only need 4 marks, meaning that you need 2 sentences for 4 marks. After that, you also briefly explain investment in social capital for 4 marks. So these are the benchmark criteria for regional development. Remember, it will be 4 marks for good governance and 4 marks for social capital. What will happen if you only explain good governance and you give us 4 points? Only 2 will be marked. You will get only to a maximum of 4. You won't get full 8 marks. What happens if you only briefly explain investment in social capital for 4 points? You won't be awarded full marks. You'll be only awarded 4 marks. What you need to do when you come across this type of questions which are two-folded and the mark is 8, it means half of the mark will be for good governance, half of the 8 marks will be for investment in social capital. Let's look at good governance. Because good governance is given in the question, you're not going to get a mark for it. Okay, so yours is to explain. You may mention that regional development strategies should be managed effectively and free of corruption. You will get your 2 marks. It must be supported by democratic decisions that should not be compromised by nepotism or secrecy, or people should be appointed who have the correct skills. You will get your 2 marks. So far, we have reached 4 marks. But you can even mention that it should involve transparency where all role players should be consulted. You can even mention that the government officials involved in this regional development should be held accountable for their behavior. Finances should be checked, evaluated, monitored. You can mention that. Proper financial management and control is essential to meet the aims set by the government. You can mention that. But remember, to a maximum of 5 marks, because the question is two-folded. Let's look at the second part of the question. The second part is investment in social capital, and you need 2 sentences. You can mention that regional development focuses on the principle of the people, for the people, by the people. 2 marks for that. Development should be addressed from below where most urgent human needs exist. Which human needs? It should cover human life, including education and health, as well as nutrition. Remember when I mentioned that educated and skilled workers are more productive than unskilled and uneducated people, as well as the healthy workers, they are more productive than sick workers. So for 4 marks, you can give us only 2 points. And then investment in social capital will be 4 marks, and in total you will get what? 8 marks. Okay, let's move to another example. This question again is a question of a middle order, middle cognitive level. You briefly discuss. What do you briefly discuss? You briefly discuss services to business processes. Again, this is a two-folded question. And the foreign investment incentives, foreign investment incentive to improve industrial development. Now that you know that it should be 4 marks for services to business processes and 4 marks for foreign investment incentive. Let's start with services to business processes. You can mention that it aims to attract investment and create employment in South Africa through offshore activities. You can stop where it says a base incentive as a tax-exempt grant is paid over 3 years for each offshore job created and maintained. Then you will get your 4 marks. If you missed this point, you can mention how this bonus works. You can mention that 20% bonus will be paid for more than 4,000 to 8,000 offshore jobs created, but it is a once-off payment in that year when the bonus was reached. Or you can mention that 30% bonus can be paid if 8,000 offshore, more than 8,000 and above offshore jobs are created, and it is a once-off payment in that year when the bonus level was reached. You get your 4 marks. Then let's move to the next part of the question, foreign investment incentives. You will mention that it is a cash incentive to assist who? Foreign investors who want to invest in new manufacturing businesses in South Africa. 2 marks for that. It covers the cost of relocating new machinery and equipment from abroad. 2 marks for that. We have reached the maximum. But if you miss those points, you can add. It becomes available to any registered company who like to operate in the manufacturing sector, but only who are foreigners. It also covers up to 15% of the cost of new machinery equipment to a certain value to a maximum of 10 million rands. To a maximum of 10 million rands. So you'll get your maximum 4 marks if you give us 2 full sentences. Avoid writing in smaller sentences because you might not even get your full marks. So this type of questions ensure that your sentences are longer. Another question. This time it will be a question of a higher order. A question of higher order. It's a paragraph question of a higher order. Will still be found where? In section B. Where do you find this type of questions? In 2.5, in 3.5, and in 4.5 of any economics exam paper. The question says, how can the development of small business benefit the South African economy? Why do we really have to develop small businesses? How will this benefit us as a country? That is where, even if when you go to your textbooks, you won't find the answers, you need to apply your creative thinking. Number one, you can mention this one, you need 4 sentences, 2 marks each, and then to a maximum of 8 marks. It provides guidance to create employment for structurally unemployed people that might lead towards a more inclusive economy. So those who are unemployed due to structural reasons, they can be able to find jobs in their small businesses. You earned your 2 marks. It promotes entrepreneurial development amongst whom? Amongst the women and the youth in rural areas where unemployment is very high. If you own a small business, it doesn't matter small, medium, or big. If you own a business, you are an entrepreneur. So this will develop entrepreneurial skills, especially of the women and the youth in our country. It also helps in diversification of the economy. If you look around South Africa, you will see that we have tuck shops, we have photographers, you know what, we have tour guides, we have a lot of small businesses even in the townships where they are selling vegetables or they are selling fruit, etc., cold drinks, etc. Those small businesses, they also help in the diversification of the economy, and they uplift what? The variety of skills. Some people started working in small businesses. Now they are employable in large business undertakings. Why? Because they learned their skills where? In a small business. Let's continue. Small businesses will also be what? Small scale employers. And this also provide goods and services, increasing what? Supply of goods and services in the economy. So as a result, because of that, it contributes to the GDP. And it doesn't only contribute to the GDP, it also contributes to the payment of taxation. These businesses, where they buy their supplies, they buy them with VAT included. They're contributing directly and indirectly to the growth of the economy. They also enhance competition, which is most needed, and it benefits the consumers. How? You asking yourself, how will we benefit from small businesses? They increase the number of businesses that are in the country. Competition increases. If competition increases, more goods are supplied, which forces the price to go down. So as consumers, we will be able to buy goods at lower prices. This is another benefit. For 8 marks, that's how you should respond to this type of questions. And these are the types of questions where you find that learners are performing poorly because they simply don't want to think critically. You have answers. When you come across this type of questions, apply your knowledge, implement your knowledge. Another type of a question which is higher, of a higher order. Evaluate the success of broad-based Black economic empowerment in South African economy. Remember, when you see the action verb evaluate, you need to do what? You need to look at the successes and the areas where it didn't succeed, or you look at advantages of it or the disadvantages. You look at the good and you also look at the bad. But there is no recipe to say that if you give us 2 successes, you must give us 2 failures. No, you can give us 4 successes, you will qualify for your 8 marks. You can give us 4 shortcomings, you will still get your 8 marks. Or you can mix the shortcomings and the successes, it doesn't matter, as long as you were able to do what? You were able to evaluate. Let's evaluate this particular policy. Let's start first with the successes. It has succeeded by implementing this strategy, which empowers the country's indigenous people as prescribed by the UN and the World Bank Development Initiative. So this is a prescription to us as a country to make sure that indigenous people of the country are empowered. So South Africa, through the Triple BEE, is able to make sure that the indigenous people of this particular country are empowered. It is successful in doing that. And Black-owned enterprises also benefit from government preferential procurement policies where adhering to the DTI scorecard is essential. We're seeing Black-owned enterprises benefiting from government tenders as well. Still on the successes. It has provided access to capital and training to potential Black entrepreneurs, focusing on empowerment of Black women. We're now seeing more Black women owning companies in South Africa. A substantial change took place in the racial composition of ownership. Now we see Blacks, we see colored Indians owning companies. So it helped to transform our economy. And then we also see most of them being in management when it comes to certain industries. You find that we have Blacks who are in managerial position, coloreds and Indians as well. And through this particular policy, we see political stability, which aimed at correcting the inequalities of the past and by stimulating participation of the disadvantaged groups in the economy. Let's look at areas where BEE was not successful. One of you is saying, but ma'am, I never saw those successes. If you have only the negatives about Triple BEE, then it's better to write them. But you need to give us 4 if you only saw negatives or disadvantaged only. Some people can say the majority of the disadvantaged people of this country have not fully benefited from the policy. Why? You must elaborate. Because poverty and unemployment is still doing what? Increasing. Again, you can mention that firms with poor Triple BEE scores are unlikely to participate in government contracts, although they employ a large percentage of Black people, impacting negatively on other Black-owned companies. So remember that not all Black-owned companies will qualify for government tenders. It is only those with an excellent Triple B scores. So if you own a company and you are a Black-owned company, but your scores are low, you won't be able to get access to government opportunities. But even though you are employing more Blacks, you won't benefit in government tenders as well. Somebody can say tenders are awarded through preferential procurement, but this is a cost to the government. Why? Because more services are provided through outsourcing of these Black-owned companies. And sometimes you'll find that the quality that is provided is not excellent. The quality is compromised. And who is to be blamed? The government is blamed if a Black-owned company does not perform a service of excellence. Corruption also is a challenge where you find that there are payments for tenders, but the work has not been honored. Or maybe foundations of RDP houses were started, but the construction didn't take place, but money was paid. So these are other challenges with comes with triple BEE. Fraud also is a problem, such as there are businesses which are able to get fake BEE or triple BEE certification, or they misrepresent government departments, or there's also failure to issue share certificates, and there's also theft of the money that is allocated to regional development. And then the redistribution of wealth was emphasized, but it has not promoted economic growth. We don't see the real impact of triple BEE on the economic growth, because economic growth is not improving. So these are the types of 8 marks paragraph questions of a higher order, where you need to use your observation of what is happening in the economy to answer these particular questions. The last question that I want to quickly take you through is an essay type questions. Discuss in detail South Africa's initiatives or endeavors in regional development for 26 marks. This we call the main part of an essay. The next part of the essay, why should government focus more on small, medium, and micro enterprises to drive the economy? This we call the additional part of an essay. So when you answer your essay, you need to remember that you must have what? An introduction. You must have what? Main part of the body. There should be what? There should be an additional part. And when you're done with the additional part, there should be a conclusion. So this we call EMAC. It will help you to structure your essay well and in an orderly manner so that you don't lose marks. So when you answer the question, you start first with the introduction. Write introduction, and then you explain what is in your introduction. So do not just write information without introduction, main part, additional part, or conclusion, because someone who will be marking want to know as to whether this is part of the main part or whether it is the part of additional. You might even lose marks. So my advice to you is that when you write an introduction, look at the question, look at a concept in the essay. There is regional development. Describe it in the introduction. Explain what is in regional development. Look at concepts, small, medium, and micro enterprises. You can describe that in the introduction. Avoid writing that in the essay. I will discuss SDIs, SEZs, corridors. I will discuss. If you mention all this in the introduction, when somebody is marking the main part of the body, you will not be awarded marks for that, because already you have mentioned the information in the introduction. Let's look at the introduction for this particular essay. Remember, I said you can describe regional development. You can, for 2 marks, mention that regional development refers to policies which are aimed at increasing the economic livelihood in specific areas or regions. Let's quickly move to the main part of the essay. This is the lesson that we did previously. Take note that you have 8 marks for headings. 8 marks for headings. You have 8 marks for subheadings or for examples. So you need to provide us with 8 headings. If you don't have 8 headings, you add with examples. For example, for just writing Special Development Initiative or for just writing SDI, you will get 1 mark. You need to explain what an SDI is, how it works. So you can mention that this is an area with high level of unemployment and poverty that has been identified by the government for a coordinated effort to develop the economic potential of the area. This full sentence qualifies for 2 marks. Don't write an economics essay using what? Using paragraphs. Use points. The area chosen for an SDI must be underdeveloped and have the potential for sustainable growth. 2 marks for that. The main objective is to stimulate economic growth and employment in those regions. You'll get your 2 marks. This is an open question. You can write as many as you want. There's no limit. These initiatives help to spread economic activities equally in the country. Your 2 marks. If you mention that it should involve public-private partnerships, 2 marks. And even if you mention how this public-private partnership will work, is 2 marks. Government provide infrastructure and then private sector provide capital. That's 2 marks. But don't forget to give us an example. And an example is 1 mark. Examples of SDIs in South Africa is KwaZulu-Natal SDI, Fish River SDI, etc. Don't give us all those examples. We move to corridors. You can explain that corridors in South Africa are special areas that offer specific advantage to mining, manufacturing, and other businesses. They have the advantage, which include the presence of existing infrastructure and specialization of products or services. 2 marks. And corridors are developed as part of regional development and SDI. 2 marks. But don't forget to give us an example. Maputo corridor or coast-to-coast corridor. Example is 1 mark. We move to industrial development zones that we did during the previous lesson. Describe what it is. You still remember it is a purpose-built industrial estate. It is physically enclosed and it must be linked to a port or airport where there are duty-free incentives. What is the aim? Designed to encourage international competitiveness in South Africa, especially manufacturing sector. And you should also mention that they fall outside domestic custom zones and therefore are able to import items free of paying import duty. So this is how you should answer your essay. They are designed to attract new investment in export-driven industries. That's a 2 mark. IDZ are the responsibility of provincial and local government. 2 marks. Give us an example of IDZ. Okay, previously we had what? We had the Kucha, we have the OR Tambo, Saldanha Bay. You get 1 mark for that. Let's look at SEZ. The heading itself is 1 mark. You can see for yourself. The explanation is 2 marks. These are demarcated geographical areas of a country set aside for specifically targeted economic activities. These activities are supported through special arrangement that may include laws. Remember, there's an SEZ Act that was formulated in 2014, and it supports systems that promote industrial development. The SES are meant to expand the manufacturing sector. You can even mention that they manufacture goods for the local market and for the international market, and they lead to diversification of the economy. Give us an example. Give us an example. In everything that you mentioned, provide us with an example. You can even mention that they have the opportunity to get an incentive of a tax reduction of 15%. We have Nkomazi SEZ, we have Malutapufung SEZ, etc. That is a 1 mark for an example. So your 8 marks will be for headings and examples. And then if you say 8 plus 18, you need 9 facts. 9 facts multiplied by 2 marks will give you 18, and this will be 26 marks. Let's look at the additional part. The same way that you answered your 8-mark paragraph questions of higher order, it is the same way that you will answer this question. But the difference here is the mark allocation. It's no longer 8 marks. It is 10 marks, meaning you need 5 points. So this question simply says, why should government focus more on small, medium, and macro enterprises to drive the economy? So if you think, you will realize that if you link this to the benefits that I've mentioned, you can go score marks. Okay, the benefit of small businesses. The small business sector employs a large part of the labor force. That is why the government should focus more on them. The average capital cost of a job created in the SMME sector is lower than in the big business sector. So the government should focus on this small, medium, and micro business so that they are able to provide more job opportunities. Otherwise, they will provide less job opportunities if they are not supported. Small, medium, and micro enterprises, they allow for more competitive markets where consumers will benefit from a wider variety of goods. There will be more choice for consumers and at lower prices. Remember, the more smaller micro, medium businesses we have, the more supply, the lower the price, the more variety of goods, and the more choice we have as consumers. Then the government should focus on small, medium, and micro businesses. It can adapt more. These small businesses, medium business, they can adapt more rapidly than larger organizations to changing preferences and trends of consumers. And they often local resources are used. Most of these small business and micro business and medium, they use local resources, which will help to have a ripple effect in the development of other industries. And they also support larger undertakings because they supply them with stock, they supply them with resources. It provides opportunity for aspiring entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs start in small businesses. The entrepreneurs that you know today, those who own large business, and they started as small, as medium, as micro as they are. And especially they were started by people who were unemployed or underemployed or those who were retrenched. That is why these small, medium, and micro enterprises need government attention. When we look at how you should conclude, when you conclude, give us a conclusion of a higher cognitive level. Do not mention something that was mentioned in the introduction or in the body. You can criticize something. You can give your own opinion. You can mention that factors such as electricity cuts, infrastructure backlogs, increase in fuel prices, and skill shortages, they hamper industrial development in South Africa. Then you'll be given your 2 marks. And that is how you should wrap up your essay. This brings us to the end of the lesson. Thank you for watching this lesson. See you next time and goodbye.